Bye-bye. Good luck. There you go, Councillor. You're live.
Right, good evening, everybody. I hope you're all able to see our live performance of the Sutton Vesey Ward Forum virtual meeting. For those of you who are watching it on catch-up after this Thursday night, I hope the weather is a bit better when you're watching it than it is for us going through it tonight. My colleague Kath Scott is joining the meeting and just has a few technical issues on our line, but we're hoping that she can join us partway through the meeting. She's given me a thumbs up here, so I will make a start on the meeting. Just reminding everybody that this is actually a recorded meeting, so although broadcast live, it will be kept on the council's internet system and can be viewed on the council's broadcast system on future dates. So we've got a busy agenda, so I'll move straight on to the first item, just reminding everybody that you can leave a question in the chat function. If you can view the chat function on Teams Live, you can leave a message on the chat function. I will read those messages to the presenters, so you can have a kind of dialogue through me, or when Kath chairs it, through the presenters. So let's move straight on to item 3 on our agenda, Coronavirus Public Health Update. Once again, we're delighted to have our Director of Public Health, Justin Varney, one of the national celebrities in this field now, vying with Jonathan Van Tam, I think, for his profile. We're keen to hear your update. One question was submitted in advance, which you may cover, but I'll ask it now. You've given information about the most probable form of transmission, which is social contact in the home. A question that asks, how do you know that? How do you find that out? So perhaps you can answer that question in the course of your presentation. So we're going to go over now to Dr. Varney.
Great, thank you, Councillor Pocock. So I'll talk a little bit through some of the generals today. I'll talk a bit about the new testing technology. I'll touch on the vaccination, and I'll touch on the point about how we understand spread and transmission at the end as well. So where we are at the moment, we are seeing the case rates coming down across Birmingham, and that's really positive news. The most recent validated rate is the 7 days up to the 27th of November, and that puts our case rate at 239 cases per 100,000. For the previous 7 days, which is from the 14th to the 20th, our case rate was 353 cases per 100,000. So you can see we are dropping down now quite well. I have to say we're not coming down quite as fast as some of the other areas across the country. And what we're also seeing is that our percentage of positive tests is not really dropping as fast as I would like. So we've still got a bit of a way to go, particularly in terms of getting confidence that we are coming down consistently. We're seeing the highest case rate in our 30 to 44-year-olds. And just to put that in perspective, the case rate in our 30 to 44-year-olds is 334 cases per 100,000. Comparing that to our 0 to 15-year-olds, that's 161 cases per 100,000. So really big difference there. What is good news is we're really seeing a rapid drop off in our case rate in our over 65s, and that's now down to 195 cases per 100,000. And we really want to see that come down to well below 100 cases per 100,000 to be confident that we're not going to see the NHS get into trouble. We're seeing quite an uptake, actually, increase in cases in our Indian population in the last 2 weeks. And that's a change from where we have been before, when that's been about 8% of all the positive cases. It's now up to about 12%. And we've seen a drop in the proportion of cases in our Pakistani community, which has come down to 23%, and in our white community, which has come down to 40%. So we're watching carefully what's happening in our Indian community that's changed over the last couple of weeks, because that is quite a marked increase. When I look specifically what's happening in Sutton Vesey at the moment, as of the 27th case rate, Sutton Vesey's case rate for the ward is 163 cases per 100,000, and that's down quite impressively from 306 cases per 100,000 the week before. And in effect, over the last 2 weeks, the case numbers in Sutton Vesey has halved from 60 down to 32. Still not, I'm afraid, best in the city. That goes to South Yardley, that have been doing really, really well, bringing their numbers down, followed actually by Edgbaston. But it's definitely down in the bottom third of wards across the city. And with the exception of Soho and the Jewellery Quarter, whose case rate's been increasing, but we know that's linked to a large outbreak in the prison, unfortunately, and a slight increase in Shard End, the majority of wards of the city are now moving downwards, which is really good news. And it's a reflection of all the hard work over the last couple of weeks when we've been in lockdown, because what we're seeing now is really the reflection of the cases that where people caught it 2 weeks ago, now they're testing positive as their symptoms developing it. So just moving on to the testing where we are now. So there are 3 types of tests. First of all, antibody test. Basically, you can only get those privately unless you're part of a research study, which includes some of our NHS staff. We know from the evidence that many people have antibodies and then their body forgets how to make them. When we do make antibodies, they're not always effective. We know that you can definitely catch COVID twice. So my advice is don't waste your money on antibody tests because it doesn't make any difference. Yeah, it doesn't change your use of social distancing, doesn't mean you can go and hug granny. I'm afraid it's, bluntly, it's academic. The second type of test is a PCR test. Same swab to the back of your nose, back of your throat, get sent off to the lab. And that test is looking for, do you have the virus or not? It's very good at finding the virus in the first couple of days when you're infected, when you're not infectious yet. So that's why we often use it when we do have outbreaks, but also we use it when people have got symptoms to say, is this COVID or not? Because even if it's the symptoms there, it doesn't always mean you've got lots of virus there. It's your body reacting to the virus. So that's where we use the PCR, and you get that by ringing 119 or the NHS website. The third type of test is this new test called a lateral flow device. So lateral flow, same swab to the back of your nose, back of your throat. I'm afraid you don't get out of the swabbing, whatever test you use at the moment. That you give to a technician in a testing site. They mix it with liquid and then they dropper it onto a little device which looks a bit like a pregnancy test, and they read that within 30 minutes. Now, because that's just a bit of test kit there, there's no fancy machine. So it's only really good at finding the virus when there's a lot of it in your nose or your throat. And you'll have the most virus in your nose and your throat when you're infectious. So we're using lateral flow tests where we want to try and find people who may not have symptoms, but may be infectious. And really what it's saying is today, you're not infectious. We think on average it's about 6 to 10 hours really after you've taken the lateral flow test when you need to have to take another one for it to be valid. So these are being rolled out in different ways. The council's working with the Department of Health on how we're going to roll them out in a targeted way to offer them to specific types of people in particular jobs. But also in workplaces. We may be working also with our hospitals to use them to help visiting in the same way they're being used in care homes. The Department of Health is working directly with care homes on using them for care home visiting. They're also working directly with the universities and also with the NHS on using this technology with frontline NHS staff. There's some pilots in schools, but that's a very small number of schools at the moment. So that's all being done nationally. And what we're doing in the council is thinking much more about how we can use them in community settings. Now, what I would just say on the care home visiting side, please be patient with your care homes. So people have got to be trained how to use the test. It's not at the moment licensed to be used at home by people that aren't clinically trained. So care home staff have got to be trained up to use it. They've got to set up the testing space to do it. And there's quite a lot of paperwork involved in getting stuff to ensure that when they are using the test for visitors, they get the right response and it's the accurate result. Even if you tested negative with a lateral flow device, it does not mean that you get to throw away all the aprons, the gloves, the face coverings, and you can go in and hug Granny. That's not what it does. It is, think of this as the kind of, it's the sprinkles of reassurance on the cake and the icing. And the cake and the icing is keeping the distance, it's washing your hands, it's wearing a face covering. That's the important bit. The lateral flow gives us a bit more confidence that you're safe. So that means potentially we can remove the Perspex screen, but it doesn't mean you're absolutely certain that you're not going to give Granny or Grandad COVID. And so that means that we still have to keep some of the risk management in place. The other thing to say is now we've gone into tier 3, that also means that care homes have to change their visiting approach. So it does mean that care homes that haven't yet got the lateral flow are only going to be able to offer visiting in certain ways. So window visits, outdoor visits, and if they've set up a visiting pod, that's possible as well. And the council's working with the homes to interpret this because as usual, the guidance came out to everyone at the same time. We didn't get it in advance. So we got that through, I think it was late Tuesday night. So that's where we are in testing. Vaccination, fantastic news. We have the first of the vaccines that's been approved by the regulator. That's the Pfizer one. The Pfizer one is the most fragile of the vaccine. So think about it. It's a bit like transporting ice cream, in that it's got to be kept really, really cold. And every time you take it out the freezer to move it somewhere else, it starts to defrost a bit. And we all know when you put ice cream back in the freezer, take it out back in it, it gets that kind of crystally taste. It's not as nice. That's what's happening to the vaccine. Each time it's defrosted a bit and it's moved, it gets less strong, it's less effective. So they think at the moment that the vaccine can only be moved about 3 times before it's too unstable, and we don't think it will work very well. And that includes when it leaves the factory in Germany and Belgium to come to the UK. So that's move 1. And then it'll go to a national hub, and then it will go to distribution. So because of that, the Pfizer vaccine is likely to be used first in hospitals, and it will be used first for NHS staff because they're in the hospital, they can be vaccinated then and there, rather than going to the care homes. And that's because we just can't move the vaccine again to get it to the care homes. And the other side is we can't bring the care home residents into the hospital. So that's the challenge we've got. Now, the second vaccine we expect to get through the regulator is the AstraZeneca vaccine. That's much, much more stable, can be kept in a normal fridge, doesn't defrost in the same way. And once we have that, then you will see vaccination rolling out. The Joint Committee for Vaccination Immunisation, they're the national body that decide who gets the vaccine when, in what order. And what they've said is over 80s, then over 70s, then over 60s. So it's working down through the age groups. And alongside that, health staff, resident care homes staff as well. And then the rest of us, and then people who've got clinically vulnerable conditions. So the people who are shielding at the moment, not the ones that were shielding in June, but the ones that are now that are considered clinically extremely vulnerable, they'll be up the top of the list. And then everyone else will be waiting our turn as it goes. And we need 2 injections for this to work. It doesn't matter if you've had the flu jab or not, but it is important that you have, if you are having the flu jab, you have it at least a week or 2 before the COVID jab. So it's really important to get your flu jab now, get it out of the way before December's over. So when it is your turn in the queue, you can get it. So that's where we are on vaccination. So just to touch base on that question about the transmission, how do we know? So when someone tests positive, they go onto the contact tracing website, or they talk to someone from NHS Test and Trace, and that person goes through, where have you been in the last couple of days before you develop symptoms? And then we track that information. And as part of that, we then also try and correlate. So what we're looking for is, have we got multiple children from the same school? for example, who've been infected? And if they're all from the same school, are they from the same class, or are they from different classes in the same building? Do they share space and therefore we think they could have infected each other, or they're in completely different parts of the building? Now, what we're seeing at the moment, of course, is that the case rate is highest in our 30 to 44-year-olds and has been actually pretty consistently about the last 6 to 8 weeks. So it's more likely that the adults are infecting the children than the other way around. Because if this was being driven by the children, we would see a much higher case rate in the children, and then that would lead to the adults. That's not what we've seen. We've seen it very high in the adults, and then it got a little bit higher in children, but it hasn't really changed. So that suggests that the transmission risk is much more adult to adult. And we are seeing that also when we look at where we see clusters of cases, most common at the moment in workplaces, where we see cases that actually link to each other, most common in workplaces. And it's not when people are doing their job, it's when they're having their breaks. So lunch breaks, cigarette breaks, traveling to work. We're really good at being good on our social distancing, our face coverings, etc., when we're doing our job. And then we go and have a break and we see a mate and it all goes out the window. And that's how it transmits. That is the real challenge we have at the moment. So that's how we understand the transmission risk. Alongside this, there are more detailed studies going on, but that's the kind of key one at the moment. So I think I've kind of tried to cover quite a lot there. Happy to take any more questions you'd like to ask me, the councillor. You're still on mute, Councillor Pocock.
That's the most common comment made online, apparently. Thank you. Great stuff, Justin, as always. Questioner Kate has asked a question which you probably answered here about the increase in the 30 to 44 age group attributed to children passing to teachers. You're saying more likely it's the reverse, that the kids are actually
sorry, and what we're also seeing is teachers passing to teachers.
Oh, wow.
And where we do see a bit of connection that's linked to the school is not in the, again, it's not children in the classroom. It's a bit like work. Kids in the classroom, very well behaved, do what they're supposed to do. School gates, and it's parents gathering at the school gates. I can understand it. You see people you haven't seen for a while, you get together for a natter, it's cold. So we're huddling under umbrellas when we have horrible weather like we did today. That spreads the virus. So that's where we're seeing the connections made. Also people that aren't listening to the regulations and are still having play dates, birthday parties, all of those things are high risk and do risk the virus spreading. But we're not seeing any evidence of transmission from children to teachers. Generally what we're seeing is teacher to teacher, and very little evidence of child to child in school.
Okay, that's if you can come back to me, thank you. It's really interesting to see the dynamics of the staff room in the school. The thing to do, I guess, is to keep away from your mates. I have a question here from Tony, who's put a query on the chat. When we receive the jab, presumably we will still be able to pass COVID on to those who've not been jabbed, because it could be on our hands or on our bodies. So how long do you think hand sanitizing and masks and distancing are going to be with us?
So I think at the moment, one of the things that they are still looking at is whether if you've had the COVID vaccination, you've had both your injections, can you still be a carrier? So particularly, can we carry it in our throat or our nose, and is that a risk of spreading it? Because some vaccinations like flu jab do give us some resistance that actually means if we touch flu, we tend not to kind of pass it on. So that's one of the things that they are looking at quite closely. And I think you only really see that and learn that when it's deployed in the field. I think realistically we're going to see hand sanitizing, social distance, face coverings well into the early summer at the earliest we'll see any change, because in order for us to relax any of these things, we need the most vulnerable people, the people that are most likely to die if they catch COVID, to have the 2 doses. And those 2 doses are a month apart. So let's say the AstraZeneca vaccine comes in January. It's going to take a month or 2 to vaccinate all the people that are highly vulnerable. And that's millions of people across the country. And once we're confident that the vast majority of those have been vaccinated, both the elderly over 60 and those with clinically extremely vulnerable conditions, then I think it's likely we'll see some relaxation in some of the restrictions. But I think until we get to that stage, this is still just as dangerous as it was back in May. Hasn't changed, it's still just as infectious. And that's why we really need this vaccination out to protect the people that are most at risk of dying.
That's great. If you can come back to me, thank you. Yes, brilliant. Just one other question. Do we have to wait to be called to have our vaccine? And who is going to call us? Or can we go and queue up, get one?
So it will be a case. It will be a case of waiting until you're called to come and have the vaccine. Now that's slightly different from the flu jab. So this week, the Secretary of State for Health said now there is enough flu jab available for those people over the age of 50 who are now eligible for the flu jab to go and get it. And it should be in your pharmacies or your GPs. So in flu, you ring up to make your appointment. In COVID, because the way it's going to be tightly controlled, there'll be specific vaccination sites as rather than your GP doing the majority of the vaccine. I think you'll get an invitation. It'll probably come through your GP and then you book an appointment. So it won't be a case of turn up and queue for it when you want. You'll be given quite a tight slot, I imagine. And it's really important when we do get that opportunity, we take it up, because it's about protecting the people we love. And, you know, as soon as I can get vaccinated, I know I'm doing my bit for the country in terms of getting on top of this, but I also know I'm reducing the risk of giving it to anyone that I care about, because I've just stopped myself becoming someone that can be infected. And that means I can't pass it on because I'm infectious. So I think it's an important thing we do take it up as soon as it becomes available, but it will be a staggered process. And for the majority of us, I don't think we will get invited until the early summer at the very earliest.
Okay, that's great. If you can come back to me, thank you. There is just a last one. We all know there are certain people who take anti-vax attitudes, but a lot of other people are just kind of wary about it and slightly cautious. What's your message to people in that category?
Well, I think it's important to remember that in order to get to this stage with the regulator, the vaccine's already been used by hundreds of thousands of people all over the world. And part of what was going on and why we've got this vaccine slightly faster than we would in normal times is because the studies on the final stage, where you give it to lots of people, have been done in multiple countries. Now, that's really good for us because it means that we know that this vaccine works in people who come from an African heritage, people come from a Caribbean heritage, from an Indian heritage, because it's been tried in those countries. And it's been tried with tens of thousands of people in those countries as well. So it's not like when you get invited to take the vaccine, you're going to be the first person to have it. I have a strong suspicion that the first person may well be a doctor or a nurse, but it'll be pretty quickly followed by the Prime Minister and the Chief Medical Officer. So, you know, the reality is that many people have already had the vaccines already. So we know that they are safe. That's exactly why those trials were done. The second thing is, the way these vaccines are created is not some brand new technique. We're using ways of creating vaccine that we've used for many, many years, similar into the way that we vaccinate against measles or mumps or rubella, the way we vaccinate against flu. You know, each of the vaccines is done slightly differently, but they're all using technology we know how to use. The bit that's changed is the little bit of broken up vaccine, a virus that's in the vaccine. And all we've done is say swap out the flu version for the COVID version. So we know that the technology of the vaccine is also safe. So I think, you know, if these vaccines were going to cause problems, they would have done it now. Now, all vaccines cause a little reaction. You know, most of us get a sore arm after we've had a vaccine. Sometimes we feel a bit fluey for the day or so afterwards. That's normal. But what the trials have been doing is really to make sure that there are no serious side effects with the vaccine, that people don't end up with any serious complications. And that's why they've vaccinated so many people, to make sure even the really, really rare reactions, they've done it enough to find out. So by the time most of us get offered it, it will be probably millions of people across the world will have had the vaccine. And I think it's pretty unlikely that you'll be the first person that has a problem if there are going to be any issues.
Okay. That's brilliant and really reassuring message. And I know I and hopefully everybody watching this programme will be able to convey that reassurance to people we know around our community. It's very helpful that you've made that point. There is a very last question. I'm just going to bring this one in. Just popped up. You've got 5 seconds on this. A resident, I won't say who he is 77. How long might I have to wait for the jab?
So I would expect people in their 70s will probably get offered it around February, March time. It'll start with people in their 80s in care homes first, then people in their 80s in the community. So I would expect certainly before Easter you would have been offered your first jab.
Okay. Well, there we go. We know where you are. So the resident has put that down. For the risk of embarrassing you, Justin, someone has put on the line here, Justin should be head of Public Health England. He's explained this better than anyone. So I think that's a great way to conclude your presentation. Thank you again. And so can I say to the audience who've admired Justin's beard over the period we've had him in it, make the most of it, because it's getting the chop. I don't know whether it's a trim or a fatal chop, but it's going to get some attention in the next few days.
It'll be a trim.
A trim.
But I'm sure I'll be back to show it to you again soon.
We'll look forward to that. Okay, we're going to move on to the next item, which I will introduce if that's okay. Did you want to say something, Kath?
No, just figuring out if my camera's working and say thanks to Justin for being here today.
Brilliant. Well, we're going to move on to the next item. It's quite an action-packed agenda tonight. So at item 4, and those of you who've seen the agenda, item 4 is a joint presentation from a number of officers who've been involved in the development of some exciting ideas about Sutton Park. Sutton Park, Boldmere Gate, as members of the public will probably know, is hosting the triathlon in 2022. And as part of that work, we have some improvements to be made at Boldmere Gate, and there is a informal consultation, but an official consultation going on now. And we're going to hear the first live presentation of the ideas that are being put forward. Feel free to comment in the chat tonight. The presenters will tell you how you can comment after tonight on the council's consultation survey software, and we'll talk a bit more about how we can come back to discuss this further once you've heard the presentation. But I'll take you straight over to John Porter, who is going to introduce this item. I'm just going to ask you one question before you start, John, because we're moving into the festive season. Are you still selling holly and Christmas trees in the park? Over to John.
Hello. The answer is we are. We've found a way around the COVID constraints, and there are certainly Christmas trees available at the Vista Centre, but we are also at the moment felling an awful lot of holly, and we're quite happy that people help themselves to the holly that's been cut down already. Much of it is actually going off to Erdington constituency, where we're using the holly brash to create the world's biggest holly wreath. Actually, so we're turning a waste product into a Guinness Book of Records world largest holly wreath. Isn't it odd the way these things connect? Sutton Park's got a connection with vaccination as well, really. Vaccination, as we've just been talking about, comes from the Latin vax, meaning cow, because the whole vaccination thing came from cowpox originally. And indeed, one of the special plants we have on the heathland of Sutton Park is a family of plants called vacciniums, which have the bilberries and things like that. So we're in a bit of a groove. It's a vax night tonight, but we're here to talk about something that's going to happen in about 18 months. The eyes of the sporting world will be on us. We have the once in a lifetime opportunity of the Commonwealth Games triathlon happening in Boldmere. Now, having a world event on your doorstep is the biggest legacy of all. There's a relatively small family of locations that have had world triathlons of any type. So we are now going to get into a unique family of privileged people. What we're not going to do tonight is tell you about the Commonwealth Games in general. We're not even going to talk about the triathlon. What we are going to talk about is some advanced works ahead of the Commonwealth Games that will see some landscape change in the Boldmere area. The other big message from this tonight is understanding what legacy is in terms of the Commonwealth Games. What has to happen is the funding for the Commonwealth Games gets spent on delivering the Commonwealth Games. So we as officers have been trying to find ways of finding an overlap between the aspirations we might have as a community here in Boldmere and Vesey and what the Commonwealth Games people need on the ground. In essence, what I'm saying is to be funded by this project, the thing that's funded needs to be essential to the Games. So unless the Games were including a slide and a roundabout section in the triathlon, well, they're not going to invest in a children's play area, for example. What they will invest in is tidying up and levelling, making more accessible and improving an area of the park where we all, I think, would like to see betterment and improvement. Can I have the first slide, please? Just speaking to my Debbie McGee in the background somewhere. I hope you can now see the slides. So we're going to just go through a bit of context and how Sutton Park is going to welcome the Commonwealth Games in 2022 and tell you what the legacy proposals for this land package are, and then go on to talk briefly about what's called the Games overlay. I'll explain later, and then talk about the programme and process and the next steps. I'll introduce another officer or two along the way, so you won't have to put up with me all the way through. But unfortunately, the Commonwealth Games people can't sign into the current BCC, what's it called, Teams presentation. So you will hear more of me than is strictly necessary or desirable, I'm sure. Next slide, please. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. The Games as a whole will create a cultural landmark and a lasting legacy of bringing people together in the way that we saw with, I don't know, the London Olympics and all the other memorable sporting events that are going on. It's worth £778 million of investment, they think. We think 6,500 athletes and people from 72 nations and territories. are coming, and a global audience of 1.5 billion people, many of which will pick up wonderful visions of Boldmere and Sutton Park to, you know, increase and improve our standing in the world. There are positive messages about volunteering, which can lead to employment and things like that. We're of course encouraging everybody to get into more physical activity and sport for their well-being. And we are seeing this legacy of regeneration, and a little bit of that, I suppose, applies to the area of Boldmere that we're going to talk about next. Next slide, please, Debbie. So, what Sutton Park has is, of course, Powell's Pool, which is clearly capable of hosting swimming. We've had triathlons here for the last few years. We've got the highways outside the park, which can provide great cycling opportunities. And the third discipline of the triathlon is running, and that'll take place within the park. And as we do that, we want to celebrate and relate all the special features of this wonderful park and our local community. We will show Boldmere and Vesey and Sutton Park off to the world. There will be perhaps 4 events, not full triathlons. They're going to be what's called a sprint triathlon. So it'll be shorter laps done several times rather than having, you know, a long marathon where you only see people come through once. If you take the example of the cycling, when they do the circuits in Boldmere, and if they go down the high street, you'll see them several times, which I think makes it a more meaningful event to go and witness, really. And you'll see on the figure on the screen there's some figures about the length of the swim and the cycling and the running. And it just reminds me, I'm glad those things are past me. I will not be there, that's for sure. But we will see a world-class field, and of course Britain has some of the best triathletes. And without mentioning names, there's actually a very significant member of the UK triathlon community who lives in Vesey Ward, and you will see that you know, one of the shops nearby it specialises in triathlon gear, and there's a reason for that. It's a locally important sport. Next slide, please. When is this going to happen? Well, yes, it's going to be July 2022, and the days are going to be just 2 competition days, Friday the 29th and Sunday the 31st. Triathlon's not the biggest sport in terms of participant numbers, and we think there'll be something like 70 athletes and a grandstand type area, which will have 2,000 tickets that go that become available when they sell the tickets for the Commonwealth Games. So it's a way off yet, but when you're preparing for games like this, incredibly complicated, people from all around the world come in to try and be in the same place at the same time to compete with each other. Well, it can't be turned around quickly, that's for sure. And we have to provide facilities that are good enough for a world-class field. Next slide, please. So the proposals are, and as local people, you will know the entrance to Sutton Park at Boldmere Gate, but there's a slide there. You'll see we're talking about an area that is just in front of the Miller and Carter. There's a field there, you might recall at one point had a mini fun fair on it, no longer functioning. And then there's a field to the right, if you look on the map, where it hosted the concert in the park that the town council did. So it's in that approximate area. And we want to, we're proposing to improve that car park surface, to make it level rather than the bumpy, informal mess it is at the moment. That will improve accessibility. We think it should have a different entrance. We'll put a new entrance in at the start of the field rather than the end of the field, because at the moment you have to drive past all the people that have parked there, and sometimes that has consequences for people in the middle of the road and all that sort of business. We can do away with that, and we think being in that location, we can produce quite a multi-purpose event space. And to support that, we are proposing to improve the electricity supply that comes to that locality, bring in a power supply that would support bigger infrastructure. It's needed for the games because there will be an enclosed area, the athletes village, and the world's media will be with us, and there's a need for more power than a standard domestic supply. So this brings with it a chance to bring in an enhanced power supply, which in the future will mean we can think about events that don't rely on generators, for example, which bring in noise, pollution and safety risks. We will have something that is cleaner and greener, we hope. Next slide, please. So I think at this point I should pass over to my landscape practice group colleague. I know him as Robert Churn. Our landscape practice group sits within the council, and they're the experts that get involved in sort of landscaping projects, and this is one example of the many things they do. But I think Bob will talk you through the next bit. Can I leave that to you, Bob?
Yeah, you can. Hello, everybody. I'm sort of coming to you from the murk of my living room, so it's a bit gloomy in here, so you probably can't see me too well, but hopefully the slides will brighten things up. The proposal, as John has sort of broadly outlined, I'll go into a bit more detail. The aim is to improve the capacity of the parking space at Boldmere Gate, and to make it, as John said, a much more level surface. We need to do that in order to hold the triathlon transition space. So that's a sort of a prerequisite, and that's why we're able to fund this work. The intention is to sort of transform the existing parking spaces and extend into the amenity grass between Miller and Carter and the existing car parks, and to create a main car park with 89 spaces plus 5 spaces for disabled drivers. So you've got 94 in the main car park, which is, I don't know whether you're able to see my cursor, but it's this dark area of grey in this area here, and an overflow car park of 136 plus 5, so 141. So we've got about 235 spaces, and at the moment the capacity is between 75 to 125 spaces, depending on how well you can park. With the marking out of the parking, it tends to control parking a bit better, and we can get squeeze more visitors in. The key thing that we're looking at, and I'll show you a bit more detail in the slides as they come up, is creating this new entrance at this point down here. Can somebody just nod if they can see my cursor going, or is that a helpful point where I'm pointing? Can people see that?
I think it's on Matt's screen, isn't it? Matt, can you point?
Matt's got hold of the cursor, right? Excellent. Yeah. So in that area there, we're going to punch through a new entrance into the car parking space, and this will then create an entrance away from where people are going to be sort of walking and moving around as they try to enter the playing field on the right hand side, which is just out of the picture. And so we're removing that sort of conflict when events take place, so that there's a safer environment in the whole of that area. And the gradient's quite significant because there's a bit of a mounded area at the front there, and we need to get a reasonable gradient to allow the athletes to be able to come in, particularly when we're talking about the para athletes, so that they can get access onto the transition space for the games. So the two shades of colour, you've got the sort of grey and the pale green. The grey, currently we're proposing a permeable tarmac surface that will provide a good firm area for the games people to set up their stands and the transition spaces for the athletes. It will be firm and even and won't trip anybody up when they're trying to change mode of transport quickly. We've also moving into the paler green area to the north. This area we're trying to maintain a sort of as natural a feel as possible within the National Nature Reserve, and we're using a material here called Eco Grid, which is a sort of stone field mesh, reinforced mesh that's a plastic, and that's filled to the surface and then covered in a fine layer of topsoil and seeded. So you get a grass. You may have come across a product called Grasscrete in the past. That's a concrete version, and this is more permeable. So this will allow free drainage as well as allowing grass to grow and for people to be able to walk across it and push chairs, etc. across it. So it will be a much more user-friendly surface and settle into the landscape. I think. Just while we've got this slide up, there's an in and an out, and where the cursor is at the moment, we're using a sort of a bound gravel surface to direct people in and out of the parking area. The area to the right, which is the brighter green area, we're keeping out of that as much as possible because we have existing trees in that bank there, and we're obviously trying to avoid any sort of impact on those trees there. I suppose we go to the next slide, please, Matt. This is just to give you some indication of the materials. As I was saying, the tar spray and chip surface, you've got that sort of nice park feel to it. It's not it's to sort of soften the impact of that access point. We're sticking to the rustic fencing, so we're keeping with what's currently there. And then you can see these slides of how that Eco Grid reinforced grass paving actually appears once it gets established. The picture in the top right hand corner is how we're going to retain where we create the ramp coming into the site to hold back the ground, and that's gives you a nice sort of natural stone effect without building sort of expensive brick walls and to hold back the earth. So again, trying to keep everything as natural as possible. Next slide, please. This is a bird's eye view of what's there at the moment, and how the site appears when it's quite busy with events on, or visitors numbers quite high, and you can see the parking is quite sort of I suppose all over the place, but it's also extends into the existing area, or the more sensitive area where Matt's got his cursor now, that sort of upside down P-shaped area with the green island. That's the overspill, and it's within the unimproved grassland area, so you could get a feel for what's there at the moment. And because it's not marked out, the capacity is limited. So next slide, please. And this is a bird's eye view. Colleague Anthony Down has done a great bit of design work here to illustrate this, and it gives you an idea of the contrast between the tarmacked area and the eco-grid area, and as you can see, the actual quantity of space that's taken up with parking isn't that significantly increased, and it does sit nicely alongside the unimproved grass area. So you've got your eco-grid and your porous asphalt, and it keeps the vehicles within the perimeter of the park, so it controls where the vehicles are going. One of the advantages I think I mentioned is the provision of spaces for disabled drivers, and then they've got plenty of space around the vehicle to sort of maneuver and get in and out of vehicles. And the design is also quite generous in terms of spacing, because of the nature of the site. People will have muddy dogs and children and pushchairs and things to get in and out of their cars. So we try to avoid making it too tight in terms of parking. It's as you can see from that, it's not a big visual intrusion into the SSSI site, the site of special scientific interest. Next slide, please. And there just puts the visual to the words that I've just said. So next slide, please. This is a sort of a car driver's view, if you like, of what it will look like. At the moment, the left-hand side slide shows some steps into a bank, and we've tweaked the entrance position and the angle of the car park so that we could avoid these two trees at the entrance. So we're managing to come in between the two trees and retain those, and also create this gentle ramp into the site, which we talked about. The next slide, please. This is coming out the other end. So we've got two entrances now. So this is the main exit point from the overflow part of the car park. As you can see, currently cars park up, filling up the space quite quickly, and with the new provision. We're looking at reducing the sort of visual impact. So next slide, please. Right, I think this is where I can drop off. There's, I think, Matt, are you going to pick up this about the power supply?
Apologies, I have to unmute myself. Evening all, I'm Matt Hageney, I'm the Parks Partnership Manager, and I'm working with John and Bob alongside the organising committee and the Commonwealth Games project team to deliver these proposals. So, as John's touched upon, one of the lasting legacy benefits from the proposals is the improvement to the site as a better events offer, should we say, to event organisers, so we can provide higher quality events, and also with the added benefit of the environmental or less environmental impact by reducing the use of generators. So the proposal is to install 2 electricity hookup points. Hopefully you can see my mouse there. So the power will be taken from Monmouth Drive, brought up Starnhurst Road. It's proposed that a substation will be installed just to the south of the lodge there. Then the power will be taken up Stonehouse Road to the existing power point. There's a little brick unit, I suppose, that you might have noticed in your visits to the park. So the idea is that there'll be one hookup point to the left there and another one to the right. The one on the left will be used primarily for the games. As John's touched upon, there is a significant energy consumption need for the games for those 2 days and the build up. Post games, the idea is that the hookup points on the right hand side there, as you look at the picture, will be used by event organisers. So we hope to increase slightly the number of events we can hold in the park. So as John's touched upon the concert in the park, we may be able to offer more open air cinema events. We believe the site has the potential to be a future wedding venue, possibly. And in addition, we've also been approached to host future triathlons. Obviously, we're using the Commonwealth Games as a litmus test to see if the site can work. So nothing is confirmed as yet. But in order to, as I say, to deliver the power requirements for the games and to provide legacy benefits, this is what's been proposed. Move on to the next slide. So as John's touched upon, and Bob as well, these are a couple of slides now just to quickly talk about the Commonwealth Games, shall we see, proposal. So what we're consulting on at the moment are the legacy works. So these are the slides that Bob's been through, and that's the, if you like, the improvements to the car park, which will form the basis for the organising committee to come in then and complete their overlay works, their temporary overlay works, which will be required for the games. So there you'll notice the temporary structures we'll be looking at early June 22, removed after the games mid-August 22, and the transition area for the athletes will be created within the car park area, and a temporary pontoon will extend into Powers Pool. So the athletes will come in here through the transition, loop round and into the park, for example, and from the pontoon they'll go there into the transition and out into the park there. This side here, I believe, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's for, that's for the OC as well, isn't it? I can't see the legend on this slide.
Yes, obviously there'll be people arriving with tickets to get into the viewing areas, and there'll be the general public. So that's going to be the point where the general public meet up with the transition area. So it will be used, we propose.
Thanks for that. I'll quickly move on to the next slide. So this is the program of or the proposed program of works. So you'll see there on the bottom left, today is the start of the public consultation for the pre-planning legacy application. So this is the we're seeking your views and the views of local residents and local members and stakeholders and businesses, etc., about these proposals. It'll be a 4-week public consultation, which will run until the 4th of January, and at which point then Bob and his team will work to submit the legacy application, the planning application, to the council's planning department. As I mentioned, it's a 2-phase approach. So the legacy project will have a planning application, and the overlay work, which is the organising committee, if you like, the Commonwealth Games team, will have their own planning submission, and that will be submitted in February, possibly March 21. Then we'll look, obviously, we will look to begin the construction in May 21, subject to planning permission, with a view to completing the legacy work around about August 21, at which point the utility point works will begin. We believe around about November, December, be completed by that point. Then the organising committee will take over for June and July 22 for their installation work in readiness for the games to hold the events on the 29th and 31st, and then decommissioning, so packing down and removing from site in August 22. So as I mentioned, it's a 4-week consultation. Hopefully you can see that slide there. Given the current circumstances we find ourselves in, we unfortunately can't do face-to-face consultation questionnaires or meetings, etc. So everything will be online. So you'll see a link there, and that's www.birminghambeheard.org.uk/place/legacy proposals Boldmere Gate. If you type in Birmingham Beheard into a Google search, that will take you to the loading page for the, and then from there you'll see the open consultations, and you can select the legacy proposals Boldmere Gate. This presentation, in fact, will be included on that page, as well a questionnaire, because as I say, we're looking for people's feedback on these proposals, so that can then feed the planning application. And alternatively, you could email the mailbox there, which is suttonparkconsultation@birmingham.gov.uk. We'd like to thank you for your time, and we'd like to open the floor to any questions, please.
Councillor Pocock, can you turn your microphone on?
Thank you. You can bring back to me. Thanks very much for that presentation. I'm really impressed by the way you've adapted to the world we're in now and presented this kind of information in this virtual meeting. In the past, we would have been in Carpenter's Arms, and you'd have had all those diagrams around the wall, and we could have all had a look at them. It's a real shame we can't do that. You've done the next best thing, and I think tonight is a first, actually, for an official consultation process to start online at a ward forum. So thanks for being the debutant, shall we say, to get this discussion on the road. There's some questions already in the chat, after which I'll pick up 2 or 3 of those, and then we're lucky enough to have a resident with us who is the secretary of the Friends of the Gates Boldmere and Bannersgate, Becky Clark, and I'll bring Becky in a moment. But can we just pick up 2 or 3 of the questions that have appeared on chat? I'll do a couple to start off with. A question here from Kate is concerned about what happens if, God forbid, the algae strike in Powell's Pool. What would we do in that situation? Does it hamper what we're going to have as the games? And secondly, are there any plans to involve the Sea Cadets or Rangers, Scouts in the new facilities and arrangements for the event? That's one question. A couple of people, Jan and Pat, have logged in to request about toilets. I think we're all keen to see the existing toilet replaced by a decent one. I'm assuming that in the games themselves it will be temporary loos that are in place, but maybe you could comment on the possibility that further beyond the games, that toilet block and other facilities around that, maybe a cafe, could tap into the power supply that will be left behind. The third question is about the car parking spaces. Someone has asked if 200 plus spaces is going to be enough for an event of this kind. Again, maybe you can comment on that. As I understand it, quite a lot of people are going to be shipped in from the city, so won't make private journeys to this event. But maybe between the presenters, you could deal with those 3 questions, and then I'll bring Becky in for a comment.
Shall I, if you want to come back to me, it's John Porter again.
Over to John.
I'm not sure if I've remembered all the questions. I hope you still go live.
John, can you pop your camera on?
You know me, I'm just too shy and modest.
Oh, yeah, in that. Go on then, over to live. Yeah. Anyway,
one of the, starting with the car parking first, you'll recall that the proposal at the moment is to get the athletes to go cycling through Boldmere High Street and roundabout. Now, although the games proposals aren't fully fleshed out, when that happens, the road to Boldmere Gate will be closed. So for this event, it requires remarkably fewer car parking spaces than 250 because there's no vehicular access, and it is anyway alongside the Miller and Carter and the other car parks in the park. The algae thing is a challenge, and what happens in all triathlons when there's a major challenge. In the oceans, that can be dangerous winds. In water, it can be things like algae, and they become duathlons. If it's not possible to swim, they just do the other two legs of the event. There are things that can be done ahead of the activity to mitigate the algae to an extent. And indeed, behind the scenes, there are also sort of discussions, and I imagine pressures going on with the water company and others, because I think it would be quite an embarrassment if we couldn't swim at the time. But there are always diseases associated, or risk of diseases, I should say, associated with water bodies, and the athletes will be instructed and coached in how to manage themselves in the habitat, and there'll be cleaning facilities and all those sorts of things. So it's not purely about algae. The toilets for everybody involved at this point in time will be temporary toilets, and Councillor Pocock is right on the money. We all want to find a way of returning public toilets to Boldmere Gate, and although this isn't the full answer, if we get to improve the power and restore that bit of landscape, that brings that prospect a little bit nearer, because we don't have to do those works to take the next step towards having public toilets. I know that's a bit of a sort of vague answer, but the Commonwealth Games people did not need to provide permanent toilets or they do not need to provide permanent toilets to function on the Games. So for that reason, it's not being supported at this point in time. And it's to do with things like the ongoing maintenance and revenue costs as well, I think, with those sort of facilities. Was that all the questions there? Have I
think you have covered a lot, actually. Let's go to Becky. Becky Clark is the Secretary of Friends of the Gates. If anyone would like to become a friend of the Gates of Boldmere and Bannersgate, then please let me or Becky know. Becky, did you have any immediate response in your response to this consultation?
Well, having just seen the proposals for the first time this evening, I really welcome the improvements to the parking facilities. Cars are currently parked really haphazardly on a poorly maintained surface. If you get a thunderstorm, there's massive ponding issues. It's a really unpleasant place to be. So having a formalised car park and one that is created in a way that's respectful to the environment as well. So the day-to-day regular traffic will be on a permeable tarmac base. But then during the summer, when we have those extra visitors to Boldmere Gate, what you see is something that looks natural for everyone when it's not in use. So that's really welcomed. I noticed that the proposals were to put a power hookup on the site. I was wondering if there'd be any scope to look at getting some revenue by putting some electric car charging points on that car park in the future. Perhaps not before the Commonwealth Games, but possibly after. Electric cars are becoming more popular, and it would be a key feature if Sutton Park had some electric charging spaces and helps reduce some of the emissions and encourage electric car use within the community too. And then other things that I noticed was the footpath doesn't appear to be altered in the landscaping vision that I saw. So at the moment, the footpath looks like it's going to cut in front of the car park. It's not really a footpath, it's more a designated marking in the road for pedestrians to follow. I was wondering if during the works it would be possible to look at locating that pedestrian allocated route onto the opposite side of the road to the car park to reduce the risk of pedestrian interaction with cars coming in and out of the car park. And it would also possibly link better to the footpath to the right towards Winley Gate and Towngate. I don't know if that's something that could be looked at. I'm just thinking it's a very low cost thing to do, but actually would probably make a big difference to people using the path. The only other thing is, obviously, the temporary works are going to be from June through to August, which is most of the school holidays. So I was wondering if, as part of the planning for the events, whether there'd been any consideration in what would happen to people who regularly drive and park at Boldmere Gate. Because obviously the school holidays, it's been absolutely packed this year, day in, day out. And if that space is used for the temporary compound, there'd probably be some concern from local residents about where visitors might park if that option's not available to them. So whether, say, the fields that are currently used for overflow car parking, I think Henry VIII Fields nearby, I think they're used for overflow car parking during triathlons now, whether there'd be scope to sort of like formalise that for visitors to reduce the pressure and burden on local residents as well. But all in, it's great to see some investment in Sutton Park at Boldmere Gate, making it more accessible for people, from the very youngest to people with disabilities, and just having a PowerPoint to hook up to for a small cafe and toilet facility like the one at Bracebridge. just having that in actually makes the potential of creating that much more viable moving forward. And again, you know, if we can increase visitor numbers to Boultmere Gate, obviously I think you were talking about 235 car parking spaces in total. That's generating revenue that probably would sustain a cafe and some toilets and some improved amenity for everybody. And again, for other events to happen, having some permanent toilets and a cafe would be fantastic too. And again, within the community, I'm sure for a number of community businesses and projects that might look to run that, as well as a community interest company. So it's all very exciting, and it's great to see investment in our community, and long may it continue.
Thanks. If you want to come back to me. Okay, that's brilliant, Becky. We all owe you a great vote of thanks. One of the most active and dynamic community leaders in Sutton Vesey. You do a great job for us. And don't forget to call out anyone watching. Become a friend of the gates of Boultmere and Bannersgate. We need your help, and the kind of work that Becky does, independent of the council. It's a resident's voice, all power to her elbow, and more elbows the better. There was a couple of questions Becky's raised, and I'd just like to add to those from the chat. There were quite a lot of questions coming in, actually. I think Kate's reminded you, John, that you didn't reply to the question about the Sea Cadets. Question about the relative location of the accessway. Someone else has mentioned this. I think it was Paul E, who suggested that those may be the wrong way round. I'm just trying to find that in my scanning of the chat. It says here, I can find it. Looking down the list, it's basically the same question. Here we are. Yes, Paul E is asking, surely the access point for pedestrians needs to be on the opposite side of the road to the new car park entrance. As Becky has said, the cattle grid and the gate would need to be reversed. And while I'm at it, Francis is asking, should any coach or minibus parking be made available? Would somebody like to come back on those three questions? John.
I will gladly. Yes, yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. Most certainly, it's a great opportunity to switch the pedestrians to face the outgoing traffic, or oncoming, as you say it. We appreciate that. The electricity hookup point is something we're actually already working on, but again, because it's not required for the Commonwealth Games, it's not part of the proposals at the moment, and we certainly want to at least follow that proposal once the Commonwealth Games has happened, and indeed we've started a much wider discussion about all car parks having electric vehicle hookup points, especially now we're going to stop manufacturing petrol and diesel cars from 2030. We have to transition to the new methodology sooner. The position of the ingoing car park where we're proposing to cut into that bank is, and if you have a quick look at, thank you, Matt, for putting the slide up, you can see the Sea Scouts building, the Sea Rangers to the right of that graphic there. Well, what we experienced with the existing format is people were parking on the left and then crossing over the flow of traffic to get to the event field when things were happening, and then people were queuing up on the road where cars were coming in, creating an obvious hazard. So our suggestion here is to divert people into this cars into this area to take traffic off that area, where people are going to cross into the field and into the wider park, particularly if the pedestrian route is on the other side of the road. So we want to take traffic off that straight run up the hill into Boldmere, and it's also my view that cars go way too fast along that route, and causing them to go into this area to park and slow down is, I think, a good thing. There is plenty of accessibility at the top end of the car park for coaches to go in, and I presume you mean great big vehicles rather than athlete coaches, just to get the semantics right. But we also have the possibility of, if you think about the existing road to the right of that bright green lozenge on the map, well, we could put a barrier at either end of that shape there and park large vehicles there, and still allow traffic to go around the loop through the car park and on into the rest of the park. So by doing this work, we create a large parking area. All the community groups are being contacted by the organising committee types from the Commonwealth Games, because we understand this impacts upon their area, and so are the businesses such as Miller and Carter. And whilst it's not yet public how the volunteering and taking part in the games opportunities, whilst all that stuff hasn't yet been published, it's pretty clear that we do want people to get involved in the games and support. And in fact, one of the things we've done quite early on in the discussions here is to seek to hire the buildings from the Sea Cadets and the Scouts and the Rangers, and our hope is that the organising committee will pay for the use of those rooms rather than bring in porta cabins and temporary equipment. So there's an opportunity for all those organisations to play a pivotal role in providing this event within the games calendars. But it's not for me or us to talk about the negotiations between those organisations, but we're facilitating that, and we do want them to benefit from this event along with everybody else. Is that all the questions?
No, there's more to come. The last batch. I'll pick up.
That's fine. I meant, have I answered the previous questions?
Let's just push on to a couple more. Can I just say to everybody who is putting questions in the chat, it's really good that you're doing it. If we don't get round to answering them all tonight, I think Leslie, who is an officer looking after this meeting, we can make sure the questions are passed on to the officers and answers provided. The other suggestion, I'm sure, Leslie, we can do this, is the presentation in front of us. We can email it to anyone who requests it. Leslie has a list of people who she sent emails to inviting to this meeting, and anybody on that list, we can circulate the presentation that you've got on screen, and then you'll be able to respond to the questionnaire which has been highlighted at the end of it. I'll pick up a couple of questions. An active resident well known to us, as celebrated as Becky, is Boldmere Paul. He's asked a number of questions. One is about the potential for a bistro or cafe at Boldmere Gate. Could BCC provide a business opportunity for a company to build and run a permanent cafe? Now, I think, John, there was at one point a call for tender in preparation, which got pulled, I think, at some point. But maybe you could update us on where we are. This would presumably be after the games are finished, but the infrastructure will be in place. Maybe that could be reactivated. members are interested in which streets the triathlon and the cycling will go along. One resident would like to have his road repaired in order for the cyclists to ride along it, so he's keen to be part of that route. And just a final question, a number of comments about rubbish. We always, when we discuss the park, talk about rubbish. Jasmine is referring currently to the rubbish bin near Bracebridge Cafe, and the adjacent pool is overflowing with rubbish. Who is responsible for emptying the bin, and when is it going to be emptied? So, John, I think that's probably the last batch of questions off the live chat. Okay. If you can sum up on those. Thanks. Back to John.
Thank you. Am I there? Yes. The important thing is we're here tonight to suggest you make comments on these proposals in through the consultation channels that we've outlined. So whilst you can pass the questions on to us, if it's a comment on the proposals, actually they should go into the consultation process. We simply don't want to duplicate work or effort, and we do want those things to be in the right place. Paul and others, we are moving ever closer towards the idea of having a catering facility at Boldmere Gate. We see the potential. Of all the things that are going on in the world, it was probably most related to Brexit at this point in time. What happened when you try and offer a contract that is worth over a certain amount of money, you end up having to put it out to a European tender process, and we found ourselves not able to do that. And in another way of thinking, that doesn't sound like a local community cafe to me, somewhere along the way. So the rules that we have to obey stopped us from moving forward on that process. The bins empty as quickly, sorry, they fill as quickly as we can empty them at the moment. I don't do politics, but when with 48 hours notice, the Prime Minister told everybody to go to parks. He hadn't actually sort of consulted anybody in parks, and ever since we've been running flat out trying to meet the demand that has been placed upon us. We are quite often ordering new bins and putting extra bins out there and emptying them at a ridiculous rate. Personally, I have to say we are all responsible for our own rubbish, and we should be taking more of it back home with us. It's to my mind financial folly that we spend more and more money as council budgets get limited, picking up the waste of other people when if they put it in their wheelie bin at home, there would be no additional cost. So everybody can help by taking more rubbish home. But it is a problem. You can report those things to the council, and through social media and on the council's website. Rest assured, it's not us filling the litter bins up, but we are doing our best to get them. As to the route of the cycling event, I couldn't tell you what it is at the moment. That's not because I'm keeping a secret. It's because I don't know. It's just the solution that's being proposed, and I'd like to think that it may well mean that your potholes will be sorted out, because I think it would be a huge embarrassment if one of the Brownlee brothers went over his handlebars down one of our streets, wouldn't it? Again, these are silver linings to clouds or silver linings to rainbows, depending on whether your glass is half empty or half full. But we want the world to see Boldmere and Vesey at its best. So now's a good time to be raising those issues, I should imagine. Highways aren't my problem. Carl will be on in a minute. And I'm not encouraging you to make his life more demanding than it is, but clearly the Commonwealth Games are stretching us at a time of COVID and financial cuts. So we won't have all the answers, but I can say hand on heart that we are trying to do these sort of things and grow and move forward at the same time.
Thanks, John. Right, thank you very much for all the officers who presented to us tonight. Can I just say in summary, and what we've heard is a presentation about the infrastructure improvements to Boldmere Gate. There will be further discussion about what will actually happen during the Commonwealth Games. Someone has asked, can they park up at Streetley and walk across to view the events? Well, I think the event's going to be quite tightly ticketed, so I'm not sure that you'll be able to do that. But we will get in the spring or summer, once the detail of the actual Games event itself is released, we will have someone to this virtual meeting from the Commonwealth Games Organising Committee who will be able to explain how the games themselves will work, and including, hopefully at that point, which roads the bikes are going to go down and how you can make sure they don't fall into a pothole. Let's just come back to the purpose of today, which is specifically about the infrastructure investments, a really, really valuable input to our area. I think the cash value probably estimate of this infrastructure is not far short of £1 million to improve the Boldmere Gate area. And we've talked about cafes and toilets. The vast proportion of the amount of money it takes to upgrade our gate is in this infrastructure, which is below the ground, a lot of it, but costs most of the money. So I'm hopeful that once we've got all of this infrastructure in place and the Commonwealth Games out of the way, we can then complete the job of getting the improvements which Becky and many, many residents have been looking for over the years. So we'll push that into a future agenda. Just to thank you again to all officers for that presentation. We've broken new grounds in doing that tonight as a launch at a ward forum. As Kath has said in the chat, please respond through the online facility. When we send the email out with the presentation, it's got the link to where you should make the response. That's it for me for tonight. I'm going to hand over to Kath for the rest of the evening items. I think we're starting with Carl Randall Roads and Highways. So over to you, Kath, to provide the introduction.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Sorry, it's quite late when we're getting on to roads and highways, but I think it was well worth spending the time on the Commonwealth Games because it's so pertinent to our ward, and obviously there's been a lot of questions about that. So if we could pass on to Carl Randall, District Highways Manager, for an update on safer Sutton Vesey ward.
Hi Carl, could you put your camera on please? Thank you.
Okay, am I on? All right,
Yes,
thank you very much. Thank you very much all, and good evening everybody. Update on where we are in Sutton Vesey, what we've been up to and what we're planning to do. So some recent schemes that we've just completed. Church Road, we've completed a yellow line scheme down there, junctions Warden Road, Browns Drive, section by the retirement home and the church. We've also done some work, some yellow lines on Knipersley Road and also Jockey Road at Britwell Road. They've all now been audited and sealed with legal services, so all of those lines now are legally enforceable. Be warned. Boldmere Schools, we did a highway improvement scheme there, funded by the school as part of their expansion. It was quite a long time on this scheme because there was a bit of debate backwards and forwards between some objectors and some people in favour of a particular element of the yellow line scheme. The 20 mile an hour scheme was welcomed and no objections. In the end, we had to sort of take a report through to Cabinet Member for adjudication because we had a mixed view from both sides, and with the assurance from myself to councillors that we would review the scheme once the schools are back to a little more normality and numbers. The objections have been overruled, and we can now proceed with that scheme. It's been awarded to a contractor, and we're just waiting for the works to commence, and that'll see the roads being made 20 mile an hour and some yellow lines in various locations along there, junction Warden Boldmere Road and junction St Michael's and junction Cofield Road, Boldmere Road, and on the bend opposite the school. Also had a petition come in that came in after the objection report, and so I've written back to the petition with the same reassurance that we will assess the scheme, and if it does need any amendments, if it does need more lines, less lines, then we will commit to having a look at those works again, and follow the same sort of consultation process so everybody has a say. We're also working with New Oscott Primary School on a Safe Routes to School scheme. Specifically, the concerns the school raised were around Monmouth Drive, and a young child was struck on that road, not seriously injured, fortunately. It has led to requests for a formal crossing facility, that being either a signal controlled crossing or a zebra crossing. A signal control crossing would be in the region of £80,000. It exceeds what would look to attract to Vesey at the moment, that kind of funding. So we was looking more towards a zebra crossing. However, because Boldmere Drive is a 40 mile an hour road, zebra crossing shouldn't be put in if speeds, average speeds, 85th percentile exceed around 36 mile an hour. So that the first phase to this, the first stage, is to bring the speed down, the legal speed limit, to 30 mile an hour. And that's proposed from Jevons Road to Chester Road North. The speed limit reduction was advertised, and pleased to say no objections were received. Again, contractors couldn't have been procured with a view to getting the measures introduced before the end of March of next year, all being well. And that'll see new terminal speed signs by Jevons Road, which will say 30 mile an hour, and also at Chester Road North, there'll be some enhanced school warning signs, etc. And then once that speed limit is in, it can be assessed with a speed survey. If we have brought the speeds down to the required number, we can then progress with trying to get a zebra crossing in, which could be £30,000 to £40,000, just depending on the amount and type of civils works relating to that location. Moving on down my list, quite busy in Vesey as always. Right, this year's works, Ward Minor Transport Measures works. We're currently looking at some more traffic regulation orders, which are yellow line schemes. We are looking at Fir Tree Grove. We are looking at doing some extension of the existing double yellow lines to cover the first garage area of half a dozen or so garages that keep getting blocked and obstructed. So the frontage is highway, so if we can extend the yellow lines, that should stop people parking in front of the garages. If they do park there, they'll receive penalty charge notice and possibly not park there again. We're also looking at Elizabeth Road. working with councillors on some local consultation on the extent of lines and on which side. And we're also looking at a small section on Station Road as well, by the train station on the Vesey side of the bridge. And again, during the next few weeks, consultation letters to all of these schemes, once we've got the extent and the detail, will be sent out. We're also looking at various roads for police enforcement signs. So on a few roads where we've got community speed watch or pro laser speed watch with assistance of the police and others, we're looking for some signs to complement that, to hopefully encourage motorists to slow down. So if the police are doing regular checks on the roads, we can put the police enforcement signs up. We're looking at some slow markings on the road as well. The roads we're looking at are Bakers Lane, Sutton Oak Road, Highbridge Road, Melrose Avenue and Jockey Road. As I say, just some signage and some markings on the road as and where we feel is most appropriate. We're also looking at some drop curbs for disabled people, wheelchair, mobility scooters, basically ease of access on corners of roads where people look to cross the road. There's still many footpaths without drop curbs. The existing height will be 5 inch or 120 odd millimetres, and we look to bring this down to 6 millimetres, which makes it much easier for people to cross the road. Councillor Scott is leading on this as our accessibility champion for Vesey, and we hope to be able to afford around 8 pairs of dropped curbs to complement the rest of the work we're doing. Moving swiftly on to some couple of road closures. We did have a request from Kia Highways, who are our service providers now, to resurface Redacre Road. We're not against it, but the request was 14th of December till the 23rd of December, which I felt was too impactive on the shopping area, which would only just fully reopen, all being well. And so I've rejected that and asked for it to be pushed back till after Christmas. A new proposed date has come to me for the 5th to the 20th of January, which I've accepted. Again, though, what I've asked for is the section from Oakwood Road to Heathlands to be done as proposed, but the bottom section where it meets Boldmere Road to be done over a couple of Sundays. They did want night working there, but a little bit too residential. I was a little bit nervous of that, and I don't see why it can't be done on a couple of Sundays when perhaps a lot less shops will be open again after Christmas into January. I'm just waiting for confirmation on that as well. Another road closure, not quite in Vesey, but half a mile away, and certainly affects Vesey. The Water Authority, the Severn Trent or South Staffs, wanted to close Manor Road. It's in Trinity Road, in Trinity Ward, but obviously coming in off Birmingham Road by Nando's, etc., would have an effect on the town and the link through to the park and Windley and Vesey. Original dates 14th of December till Christmas Eve, which again I've rejected. It wasn't emergency works, there's a need for it, so some pipe work underground, but they've now agreed to propose to come back 25th of January to the 3rd of February. Again, could be subject to change, but that's what we've asked for. Some schemes recently taken place or about to take place in Vesey. Greenway Drive, carriageway works should be finished this week. I haven't been up there, I haven't heard if it's finished, but those works were scheduled to be finished. Kings Road, we have some footway works proposed, 14th of December onwards. I say propose because quite a number of roads have slipped in the programme. Hopefully that's still on target. And there's some carriageway works proposed for Lapworth Drive as well. Lastly, an update we had, councillors bring to my attention some advertising signs on roundabouts. Typically, this was Jockey Road, College Road, Maxstoke Road.
They've gone.
They've gone. They went the day after I reported them. They are highly likely to come back. Birmingham City Council, as an authority, has entered into an agreement with a company called Community Partners. I think it's a 50-50 deal, I don't know, but they will seek out people that want to sponsor or advertise on those roundabouts, and I say there'll be a profit share of that. There's quite a lot gone in Sutton already because I've had the complaints and I've kind of checked them out. Four Oaks Road in Four Oaks, some have gone in there. Minworth on Minworth roundabout. There's been some for years there, but there's some rather large ones there now as the companies change. Each site needs planning consent. The Jockey College Road had slipped through the net. That sought pre-app approval back in about 2014-15, but they'd not actually got approval. So it was brought to my attention by your councillors. Around the 18th of November, I went out on the 19th, and on the 20th they were removed, but they will be back, I'm quite sure. That's a quick whistle-stop tour of highways from me. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, come back to me, Leslie. Thank you very much, Carl. I'm delighted to have seen 2 days after I spoke to you about those the signage on our lovely small roundabout, that they were gone almost immediately. It was efficiency at its best. I have one question from a member of the public, from our lovely board mayor Paul. Any updates on Sunnybank Road resurfacing since the last time you emailed him? Perhaps we could just go over some of the remits as to what and how we define what needs repairing and replacing, and how we do that, because I know there's a safety sort of element involved, and you would be best placed to elaborate than me.
Yes, thank you. Amy previously would have done a number of surveys, tests, anti-skid tests, scrim tests, all kinds of different assessments of the highway, and that all goes into a matrix, and every road is scored, and those of the greatest concern are resurfaced first. This has been passed over to Kia Highways to an element that they've got a much shorter initial around 14-month contract. We've also got our partners Arcadis, who are using tarmac to do quite a lot of resurfacing, because we had probably a couple of years during the disagreement where Amy were only doing reactive and small works. There was no larger resurfacing, so a lot of roads in the city deteriorated. So as local engineers, we was asked for a number of roads to be put forward. Councillors were asked for roads to be put forward. Many hundreds of roads were then subsequently put forward across the city, and they're what are being worked on at the moment. Well aware of Paul's request. I've been to Sunnybank myself. I've seen its poor condition. I didn't get a cup of coffee, Paul, but maybe next time. And I have brought it.
That's all it takes. All it takes is a cup of coffee.
Yeah, and maybe a biscuit. I have brought it to their attention as well. When I seen during the Parks presentation and John's, when I seen Paul's comment about Sunnybank, I did quickly check the list, and no, it's still not on the list that we have, which is for the next few months till around April, May time. It's still not on there, but there's many roads that are like that also
There
need
are.
doing. But
just to elaborate on that, I've been out on walks with Kia Highways with the manager for our area, Lucy Dumbledon, Lucy O'Grady. Don't know why I always say Dumbledore. So with Lucy O'Grady and our local engineer, and we've logged quite a lot of issues, but most of them don't meet the safety standards for repair. So what I'm going to do is go on out on more of those walks in the future and going forwards. They're giving me a list of which roads they're doing each month, so I'll give them a special nudge just for you, Paul, to have a little look up your road. Okay, so brilliant that we've had the long-awaited safety measures in place around Cofield Road and Church Road, and the safest routes to school schemes are working really well. As you know, schools are my passion, kids are my passion, and it's really nice to see that, you know, even though it takes a long time, which is necessary, you know, we've got to reduce speed before we can get in real proper safety measures on Monmouth Drive. It's the right thing to do, and it's brilliant that it's working at a pace. And also I'd like to thank Carl and the team for working so hard on the accessible Vesey ward. We've established a number of different roads that we feel require additional dropped curbs to enhance accessibility for our residents, and those will be being put in place as soon as possible, and we'll have the list of dates as soon as we can, perhaps for the next meeting where we can announce that for you. Are there any more questions? Let's have a quick scoot. There's one cheeky question for you, Carl, off the top of my head, which was, what are you celebrating, or is that an early Christmas that is behind you there? The decorations in your room.
Yeah, my son was 25 a couple of days ago.
That's marvellous. So Tony's asked, there are still no dropped curves in Rain-Aiding Drive. That's on the list, I believe.
It is on there.
Yeah. So
unfortunately, the list exceeds the budget about 4 times over.
Yeah. So what we've got to do is we've got to establish an order of priority, basically, Tony, so that we can you know, establish which ones need doing first. And I'll come up and have a little walk round with you and have a proper look at the particular area that you want to go through with you, because I know that's something close to your heart too. Another question from Anonymous: will there be a zebra crossing on Monmouth near to the Boldmere Gate entrance, especially with the Commonwealth Games coming? And cheekily, Boldmere Paul said you're more than welcome to come round for a cup of tea and a biscuit.
Excellent. On the zebra crossing, it is something that has been requested and petitioned for. It has gone to the town council, as far as I'm aware, and I believe it was due to be tabled, to be heard, and I offered to be called in and questioned on it, because I think funding was being sought from the town council, but I must admit I haven't heard or had an update from that in a while.
Bring me in, I can give you an update on that. Can you bring me in?
Yeah, let's bring Rob in, please, Leslie. If you can skip that.
Yeah, thanks. Just an update on that very issue. 2 issues, in fact, in the chat. The zebra at Monmouth Drive, which is the subject of a petition. We were all lined up, all the town councillors, to present this petition, only to be told by the officers in charge of the town council that there was no procedure to submit a petition. So they have now created a procedures guide for how to submit petitions. So we can now get that petition in. And once it is in, there's a very large budget unspent of projects like these, so I'd be relatively optimistic that it will get the green light from the town council. Just while looking at the chat, Paul E has also made a comment about speed signs and speeding on Holton Road. I have spoken to Paul about this. This is Paul E, different Paul, to Boldmere Paul, also an active resident. And there is a scheme which my colleague Manish on the town council sits on the planning committee, where, as I understand it, they are looking at low traffic neighbourhood options And one of the options that's been prepared by some consultants for the town council covers the area around Holton Road, and that has been selected as a preferred scheme to be taken forward to the next stage of feasibility. Carl probably knows about that. And there's a bid in for the cash to which comes, I think, from the Carl will probably correct me on what this scheme is. It's a government fund which has come through the emergency coronavirus cash.
Yes, it's possibly the emergency active travel fund. That's possibly. I did meet with the town council officers and the consultants, and we went through basically the whole of Sutton Coldfield to look at areas and to be able to define those as low traffic neighbourhoods, how they could look, where they would be, and would they work. What I was unsure of is what they're taking forward. My discussion was the sort of higher, wider discussion of what could be done and what could work. What I'm not sure of is what's actually going forward. It's reminded me that there's another one we're doing city council wise, not quite in your ward, but really just a stone's throw, and that's Broadfields Road and Florence Road. We're looking to do hopefully a very straightforward scheme there, which is just up the road from yourselves. I also forgot to mention a joint collaboration that the town council are funding with Erdington Ward, in Erdington Ward and Vesey Ward, which is the pedestrian refuge on Sycamore Road, Beach Road. That's also half in Vesey Ward, literally down the middle.
Brilliant.
Okay, I'll just check in to see if there's any more questions out there.
The parklet.
Parklets. Yes. Do you know what a parklet is? And do you think they're appropriate for our ward? Because we do have quite wide pavements on our particular high street. Yeah. Not all the way down, obviously. So, yeah, your opinion would be great on that.
Yes, the parklets have really taken off in the city centre. There's 5 BIDs, business improvement districts, and what they were looking at was extending the offer with sort of pubs, cafes, the eating and drinking on the streets type of situation, where when COVID first came in and people were limited in numbers in pubs and cafes and distance on where they could sit, etc., the government agreed that the public highway outside of these places could be used under certain conditions, and they brought in a new licence called a temporary pavement licence. The only thing similar at the moment or previous was a pavement cafe licence, which you'd be more familiar with, say, in Sutton Town if you went to Coffee One and you see the tables and chairs outside, or Cafe Nero, or the pizza place on Birmingham Road, or Greg's. All of those are licensed by myself, by my team, and it's around £1,000 a year to have the tables and chairs out, depending on the number. There's two rates depending, up to 4 tables and chairs or over. The government's temporary pavement licence is £100, and it goes through to the end of September 21, which when it came in July was obviously around 15 months as opposed to £1,000 for 12 months. So there was a very large take up of these, and it included in the city centre primarily parklets on Colmore Road, Temple Street, and that's really where they'll build out into the road where it's safe to do so. Have some tables, chairs, some railings, and basically an extended eating or drinking area. So that part of the sort of industry could get back on the feet. There was money for this in the early stages, because if you imagine the legal order, costs a little bit, but not too much. The license only £100, but then to have the tables and chairs in the road for 18 months, the costs can escalate, and they were costing somewhere around £4,000 a parklet, which, you know, your typical pub or club didn't want to pay. Obviously, that would take a long time to recoup. And so the city, as part of the ATF funding, had the money, and it was a first come, first serve. I'm not aware of, and I could be corrected, I think maybe Kings Heath, as part of a sort of an LTN as well in York Road,
Moseley,
in Moseley. Other than that, they didn't really have any more. And I did consider Boldmere Road, but it would be difficult, because if you imagine, you know, I can't think of a shop to pick, and it'd be wrong to pick, but if a shop on Boldmere Road wanted to have some tables and chairs in the road in the lay-by, well then where is it? It's in the 1 hour limited parking. So as a very, very minimum, you've taken a space away for somebody. But the reality is, a 5-6 metre space, they'd want more than one space. So you begin to affect the parking. And Boldmere Road, very busy road, 5,000 vehicles a day or more. Very close to those parked vehicles. I'm not sure how safe and how well it would work there. It certainly could be considered, but I don't think the city's got the funding as it did in the early part, which was sort of July, to help assist with that funding. But the shops can still apply for the temporary pavement licence, you know, if they're the equivalent of, say, Pippers. You know, they've got their own private forecourt, but if they didn't, then they could have applied for the £100 licence and could have had the area outside of the shop. Now, in some areas it wouldn't work. If Costa applied for it, well, the footway isn't wide enough. It's 2.5 metres, so they couldn't. They could apply for the parking bay, but then is that what we really want? And, you know, lose another 3-4 parking spaces, lose a turnover for the rest of the shops. We really have to look at who requests, what the request, and whether it's, you know, of a benefit, or would it, you know, impact on the wider community negatively.
Great answer there, Carl. A direct quote there from Paul. So thank you very, very much for that. I think we need to swiftly move on now. So thank you very much, Carl, for the generous update, and for all the hard work that you and your team do, because it's much appreciated by not only Rob and I, but the community as well. So we're moving on now to social care for the over 50s, and with Miriam Aslam, who's the manager for Sutton Neighbourhood Network Scheme. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get Miriam on live, so I'm going to read out her update on her behalf. So first of all, I'd like to say welcome, Miriam, to Vesey Ward and to the Neighbourhood Network Scheme. Miriam is the Sutton Coldfield Neighbourhood Network Scheme manager, and has recently joined the team, replacing Kate Gomez. Miriam, who has previously worked on the Ageing Better in Birmingham programme, which supports older adults across the city, and she has plenty of community development experience and is very excited to support the community of Sutton Coldfield. The NNS team have been working hard during the pandemic to support community activities to continue and adapt the new normal we find ourselves in, and some of the community assets that they have recently supported are Sutton Coldfield Methodist Church Community Centre. A large community centre is attached and run by the Methodist Church, and the NNS have helped them purchase PPE and signage to allow them to safely reopen the facility. Boldmere St Michael's Football Club, which is obviously a community football club that provides activities for all ages, and funding was given to support their walking football activity and allow them to purchase further PPE also. And SCDAG, a CIO aiming to support disabled residents from post-education to older adults. This grant will enable SCDAG to work with local residents and community assets to map disabled-friendly community assets. And Miriam states that we are looking to support mental health provision across Sutton Coldfield and are currently working on digital inclusion programmes. If there are any assets or community groups who'd like to support their efforts, in either of these areas, please get in touch. I think that's a direct shout out for you, Tony Willis. And finally, there is the Christmas shoebox appeal, which you may have seen on Facebook and on our Vesey Ward Councillors Facebook site, and it's the Sutton Call for NNS Team shoebox appeal for local older adults. The drop-off point is at Community Cafe on Boldmere High Street, and it will be open until the 18th of December, and gifts should include hats, gloves, scarves, toasty socks, activity books, puzzles, books, stationery, toiletries, and pictures by children, and a Christmas card. This is just to enable us to spread some holiday cheer. So that's a quick update from Miriam. Let me just see if there's any questions on that. Okay. Next up, we go on.
Tony's got a statement, has he?
Yeah, so not a question, but a statement. We are obviously not having meetings, but Zoom is being considered. Our newsletter gate post is now monthly from December. So thank you for that, Tony. So I will move on really swiftly because we are past the 9 PM curfew. Community groups update. So I'd like to welcome to Boldmere High Street a small community interest company called The Way Forward. The Way Forward are a non-profit plastic-free supermarket run by unpaid volunteers. They support other small eco-friendly and zero-waste businesses within the shop. The concept is to bring your containers to fill up, and they offer frozen foods, vegan bakery items, including bread, household cleaning products, including liquids, washing up liquid, laundry liquid, fabric conditioner, etc., body wash. And what you do is you bring in your empty pump dispensers or whatever vehicle you want to fill, and you simply fill it up and pay for the weight of what you buy. So that's going down really well in the local community, and anyone who wishes to volunteer, they do have space, I believe, for anyone who wishes to volunteer to work in the shop with them. Next is Eco Sutton. Eco Sutton are linking with the Scouts in East Sutton to widen our data collection on air pollution. We will be liaising with the group Caring for Wild Green Station in their ambition to make the walk from the station to Highbridge Road a green corridor, and initiatives like this are important for helping wildlife and plants to prosper in the urban environment. The Boldmere Neighbourhood Forum. The Boldmere Forum have secured some funding for the next 12 months, so congratulations there. And they are happy to receive any ideas to help with projects in the local community. So I haven't got Ray's email address on me at the moment, so if you want to get in touch with the Neighbourhood Forum, please contact myself or Rob, and we will put you in touch with Ray so that you can get your ideas heard and hopefully supported. So finally, there's been a bit of online chatter recently on Facebook and on boldmere.org regarding very, very noisy bin trucks waking up our residents at 5:30 on a Monday morning. So I'd just like to say to you guys, and Rob, you can correct me or elaborate a little bit more, you being the bin maestro, that these trucks are very old and clearly in need of a good dose of WD-40, and they are on a programme to be replaced with cleaner, greener trucks. So I've put a request in to get that particular truck looked at. So hopefully that issue will disappear, but in the meantime, all the trucks are going to be replaced. Do you want to add a little bit more to that, Rob?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course you do. Go.
I never miss the opportunity, as you know, to mention rubbish, and I've got two things to say on rubbish. The first is Kathy's right. The vehicles are clapped out basically, and I think the offending vehicles have been on hire. There is a replacement fleet, a modern, clean, fuel efficient new fleet. 3 vehicles were actually delivered to the depot this week. I think there's a total of something like 40 or 50 dust carts across the city being replaced. So they're coming in now from the suppliers. So fingers crossed, we should have quieter vehicles, cleaner, less polluting vehicles, and vehicles that are more efficient. While talking about rubbish, the last thing for me tonight, Christmas rubbish collections. You'll be pleased to know that all the rubbish, general residual rubbish, the grey bin rubbish, is going to be collected in our ward throughout the Christmas and New Year period. In our ward, you're either on a Monday collection or a Tuesday collection by and large. The Monday after Christmas is actually a bank holiday, 28th of December, but they will be collecting the general rubbish. What you've got to watch out for, if you're on the Monday collection, I think we've got 1,800 houses on Monday collection, you will not have your recycling collected. You will have your general rubbish, chicken carcasses, turkey bits, and whatever will go, so they don't have to hang around. But your recycling, all those Christmas presents you hope you're going to get, a wrapping, you will have to store until the next scheduled recycling collection, which is on the 11th of January. So that's just for those on the Monday collection. You'll miss the Monday recycling collection in that scheduled week. And apart from that, the service is actually better than it's been for a long while, and let's hold fingers crossed again that they continue to collect reliably for the rest of the next year. That's all from me tonight. Happy Christmas to all. Kath, I think, is going to send us.
I'm just going to round up for the last couple of things. So before we get on to any other business, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things finally. Speed Watch and Street Watch, the local police Vesey Ward team have been in touch, and they are working out at the moment the best way to bring back our Street Watch and our Speed Watch community groups. And so keep your eyes peeled for communication from Sam, who will be letting us know what the new protocols are around that, or simply log on to Street Watch if you remember, and look out for an update there. And finally, some really nice news for Christmas. Some residents, and this is completely resident led, it's been nothing to do with Rob or I, but we thought we'd share the lovely community spirit that we have out in Vesey Ward. So residents of Sunnybank Road, Corbridge Road, Highbridge Road, and possibly many others are holding driveway / front garden Christmas celebrations. These are being held on the 19th of December from 4 p.m. So join in.
You might want to repeat that, Kath, because your line went down just as you were saying it. Do it again.
Do it again. OK, so residents of Sunnybank Road, Corbridge Road, Highbridge Road, and potentially others such as my road, are holding driveway and front garden Christmas celebrations. They will be starting. Well, we'll be on the 19th of December from 4 p.m. So if you're around and about, take a peek and have a little look and say hi to your neighbours. There are some thoughts about them combining it with the Father Christmas visit through the Rotary Club, but I'm yet to hear news around that. So keep your eyes peeled on the local communication channels through Facebook and the internet, etc. And we'll keep you updated. So finally, to the last two things on the agenda, any other business?
Not for me.
Let's just double check to see if there's no more questions in the chat. No more questions. Just to let you know that the email address to get in touch with the Boldmere Neighbourhood Forum is boldmere.forum@talktalk.net, and that's in the chat if you wish to scroll up and find that as well. Finally, on to future meetings. We haven't got a date in place at the moment, but they will be in the new year. So it leaves it to me to say have a really, really beautiful Christmas. Don't let COVID get you down, and please keep safe and follow the rules. And we'll see you in the new year. Good night and God bless.
Brilliant. See you soon.